heart attack yesterday, serious enough, although they don't know if it was stress-related. I wonder if you have any insights as to how coaches can handle stress in pressure situations.
Well, Roy, I think football certainly is a little bit different than basketball because each game that you win or lose, because you play so few games, they're so much more meaningful. There's an awful lot of pressure put on coaches today in all sports. But basketball, to me, the coaches in basketball, I am amazed that we don't have more people affected by job-related stress. Their health is not affected in some way because these people go out there 82 times a year plus playoffs, and it simply is a very, very difficult job.
I think the Lakers played 115 games last year, including 3 7-game series. It's a long season. Did you get out of coaching, by the way, because of the stress, do you feel?
Boy, it was a combination of both. I didn't feel very good when I was coaching. It's something I really didn't want to do, and I think that with the fact that you put so much pressure on yourself to try to get better as a coach, and I didn't know very much about coaching at all. And I think when you're dealing not with yourself, you're trying to care for 12 other people, trying to do all the things that are related to coaching those people, then it makes it a doubly difficult task. And then I think when you set very high standards for yourself, the stress gets, it's ridiculous how much you feel it.
Incidentally, stress is, I think, proportionate to the expectation of the press, the fans, etc., in the front office. Everyone expects the Lakers to win every year, including one of your favorite people in basketball, Dick Vitale, who was on our program only last night. Dick Vitale talking about why he thinks the Lakers indeed will make it 3 straight here.
I'm going to give him 3.
The hat trick?
I'm going, hey, Woolridge and David Rivers is going to give him that little speed. I think, you know, they would have liked to maybe had Shaw, who I think is going to be a great player.
David Shaw, right.
No, that's
Brian Shaw.
Brian Shaw right. is going to be a heck of a player for the Celtics, but they got David Rivers, who's going to add a little quickness, and if Woolridge can keep himself out of any kind of problems off the court, he'll be a great asset, and Kareem's farewell, I could see nothing but the Magic Man and that team dancing again.
By the way, in the Denver Post recently, Kevin Simpson wrote a piece about the Lakers, the expectations, and the fact that people constantly try to make it a certain way every year. How many times since 1980 have you heard this one, that the West had finally caught up with the Lakers? Maybe everyone east of Inglewood has gotten tired of seeing Jack Nicholson, but don't touch that dial, America. Showtime ain't over yet. You agree, too, and you're not one to go out on a limb boasting at how great we are, but you really believe the basketball might still be ahead for this basketball team.
Well, Roy, we have a team that likes to win. We're more talented than we were last year, but talent doesn't necessarily make you better. But we have a legitimate chance to be good. And I think for people to write us off or say we don't have a chance, I don't think they know what's inside of most of these people who play on. These guys like to win, and they've proven they can win. And this is not an old team except for Kareem. It's not an old team. We have a lot of players that are right in the prime of their career, and all of them are proven players. But I think it's nice to be cast in a kind of an underdog role. It takes the pressure off of you. It's nice to see some of these other people picked. And the expectation level, all that's written about them, all that's said about them, is going to make their job even more difficult because some of them are not able to handle that. But this should be a great year for the Lakers. We don't know if we'll win, but it should be a great year.
Of the Orlando Woolridge move, there's a theory. The front office folks, the Knicks had a chance at Woolridge, were interested, but they said that because of his drug problems, if he fell off the wagon, it would greatly impact a younger team, not as much an older veteran team like the Lakers who can handle that. With that being said, do you feel it was a great risk for the Lakers to take Orlando Woolridge?
Roy, I think anytime you have a player that's had a problem, there's certainly a risk. We're hopeful because he sought us out in this situation. That by him wanting to come here, he knows that he's going to have to change a lot of things about not only his personal life, but I think also the way he plays.
Also took a $700,000 pay cut to play for the Lakers. He wants to play basketball.
Well, again, he feels that this is an area where it's going to be a great support to him. He has a strong support group here in Los Angeles, and we're hopeful that he will be able to play up to what he's played in the past.
It's possible that Magic Johnson may not be up to what he's been in the past, and that's a good thing. I'm talking about body fat. That's down, something like 4% body fat, and he's still just 29. Actually in better shape right now than he's been.
Roy, I think he's going to have his greatest year, and people can say, how can he have his greatest year? Well, he has matured so much, and he knows what it takes to play this game at this level, but he's remarkable. You know, you talk about winners in sports, and everyone talks about Bill Russell, but this guy is, in my mind anyways, is one of those people who ranks up there with the greatest players that ever played this game, and he's a young man. He's 29 years old.
Talking before about the motivation for the Lakers and maybe a campaign slogan every year, and this one would be win one for the big fella. Pat Riley talking about Kareem and the fact that it might be difficult to take him out at certain points this year. Here's what Pat said.
Because Kareem is 42, there's this perception that when he has a bad game that he's embarrassing himself. I hope we just look at Kareem's year and say, he had 19 wonderful years. We will judge him based on a great career. Let's forget about judgment. Let's send him out into this great field of open life with class and dignity. And I hope people will remember and say 5 years from now, God, I wish he was back here shooting that skyhook.
Nostalgia is nice, sentiment is nice, but isn't that a dangerous theory, you know, because of the great years in the past, leaving him out there and maybe hurting the ball club?
Well, Roy, I think each of his last few years, he's played less minutes, and I would assume he's going to play less minutes again. But he has a presence about himself on the basketball court that is very important to this team. And I would tell you that all these young players who come in and think they're going to have an easy day against him, they'll be very surprised.
Let's talk about some other teams right now. Let's start with Larry Brown in San Antonio. He contends, before we talk about the controversy at KU, he contends there are 20 coaches in college that are making more money than his $750,000 that he's making to lead the pros. Is that true?
College coaches are very highly paid. They have some wonderful packages, and it wouldn't surprise me if that number would be more than that.
So it's not surprising to you that he's getting that kind of money at San Antonio. That's a good thing, then, from a general manager standpoint, to see coaches pulling down those kind of bucks?
Well, Roy, I've always felt that coaches are underpaid, and I think when someone has a bad team, it's always easy to go out and say, well, we need a new coach, and it's easier to do when you're not paying that guy a lot of money. But I think if there's more money being paid to this coach for a very difficult and stressful job, then there's less likelihood that they would fire him.
All right, let's talk about KU and the controversy there. Paper Today, USA Today, Rick Barry, whose son Scooter plays at Kansas, was angry, said that the players at the school shouldn't have to pay. The coach who left the school should have had to pay, going to the pros, the school on probation now for 3 years. What about that? Do you think there's anything that college basketball or professional basketball could do to a coach who leaves for the pros and leaves in its wake basically a devastated program?
Well, Roy, because I don't think anyone really knows the circumstances there. You know, you see bits and pieces of it, but you don't know the whole story. And I think to indict a coach for something that looks not very good is not really very fair. I mean, it's happened to a lot of different places. Certainly the NCAA is a very powerful body, and they've dealt some severe punishment to schools. But in most cases, I would think that the coaches, in a lot of cases, are innocent bystanders. The alumni are very powerful. They want these schools to be successful, particularly in their athletic programs. And I think if we could control the alumni a little bit better, probably the coaches would do a lot better job themselves.
Before we go to the break, Danny Manning, of course, an alum from Kansas. It's still yet to be signed by the Clippers as we tape. Whose fault is it right now that the Clippers and Manning are so far apart?
Well, I don't think you can say it's either party's fault, because I think with all the comments you see, you know, the Clippers have done a wonderful job in stockpiling a lot of young players. Danny Manning's a very attractive player for them, and they publicize him very heavily as contributing to their future success. And I think the agent looks at him and says, well, this is a business deal. Obviously, there's not a meeting in the minds here, and I think really for the basketball fans and for the Clipper organization, it's not something that I would like. They need him. They need him from the start of the season to get this team off the ground, because they are improved. And again, it's one of those tragic things that sometimes happens in sports when you see people disagree over in areas that sometimes don't make sense to the average person, because, you know, they're talking $2 million a year, and at times I think fans get turned off by that. But that's really the reality of this league today, Roy. There's a lot of people making a lot of money. The league is successful. And there's always going to be the average person that looks at this and says, well, he's wrong. Again, we don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but I just think it's a shame that he's not in camp.
Just to give you an idea how petty it's gotten, one of the demands since taken out, was that Danny Manning received all the frequent flyer mileage on the team's road games. It's actually true. We'll come back with Jerry West, the general manager of the Los Angeles Lakers. We'll talk about other teams, including the mailman who delivers, cover boy for Sports Illustrated, this year's basketball issue, Karl Malone. We'll talk about it after this. Jerry West, I don't think I've ever asked it in this way, and you're a very humble guy publicly. Your statistics are unbelievable in terms of what you did as a player and as a general manager. I'll say that. But can you honestly say, despite the humility, that the Lakers' 5 championships in the 80s is a greater feat than the Celtics' 8 championships in the 60s?
Well, that's hard to say because everything changes so much over the course of time. Those Boston Celtic teams were incredible teams, and I was on the recipient of numerous of those beatings that were administered. But the sport has changed so much, and it's grown so much, and I think it's particularly grown in the perception it has with the public. The public now has accepted this sport. When I played, sometimes we'd go out and we'd have 3,000 or 4,000 people watch us play. That doesn't happen in the NBA anymore. I mean, it is an exciting, viable sport that has so much more written about it, and I think when you have history and nostalgia involved, people are going to say it has to be more difficult today than it was then. I don't know that. I couldn't say.
Yeah. Of course, you didn't have players with the versatility, power, speed, strength of a Karl Malone, maybe the fastest forward to ever play, and certainly one of the strongest. Let's talk about him as an individual player in the Utah Jazz scheme of things.
Well, he's tremendous. And when you look at him, the speed and size and quickness, and I think the one thing that great players have, they all seem to have great hands. And he's just such a powerful kid, and he likes to play. I think he's going to get so much better that it's going to be unbelievable because he's improved his free throw shooting. He was a 60% free thrower late in the ball game. You could foul him, and a lot of times he wouldn't convert him. You can't do it anymore. But he's tremendous, and I honestly think that when you talk about great players, and you start putting people into categories, he puts as much pressure on you as any team and any player in the league. You have to do different things against him.
Yeah. Mark Aguirre, after all is said and done, can you say it's basically unfulfilled potential? Even though he's been an all-star, even though he's been a relative winner, he hasn't delivered what he's totally capable of.
Well, again, I think that's unfair because when you get a person or a player in any sport, you get the total package. And in a total package of a player, Mark Aguirre is incredible. He's played on teams down there that simply have not been good enough. Now they're close to being good enough. They had a legitimate chance to beat us last year. He's a young man yet, and I think it's unfair to judge any player, particularly when he started out with an expansion team. But he's tremendously gifted. He always seems to do the little things or say the little things that puts him in the eye of the public, so people sometimes view that as being an incorrigible. He's been a great player for them, period.
By the way, another player reportedly in the doghouse, even though he's a sterling player, is Clyde Drexler up in Portland with Mike Schuler. Of course, he was nowhere to be found in the postseason last year in terms of putting points up, and he finished high in the MVP balloting. How do you rate him as a player?
Well, he's really improved. I mean, he's a tremendous player now. I think as he went along, he had the concept that, I'm going to be a scorer first and a basketball player second. He's now a basketball player, and I think playing against in the playoffs last year against a great Utah team, one of Clyde's great strengths is to take in the middle and lay it in or dunk it. And against Utah, you can't do that. So you have to adjust your game. He's still learning. He changed positions from in college to the NBA. And he's still a young player in terms of growth, but he'll be a tremendous player again this year.
How much is Walter Davis, in an advanced age and with all of his problems, going to really help the Denver Nuggets?
Well, they felt last year that one of their biggest weaknesses was their ability to shoot the ball consistently outside, and there's no one in basketball can do that better. I think it'll be an adjustment for everyone when he goes over there for a while. But again, he gives them that real deep, solid threat that they need. And I think playing for Denver the way they play, Doug Moe seems to get the best out of all players. I think he'll do a great job there.
Incidentally, Doug Moe, when they asked him, when the scouts come to scout his games, to watch his plays, he says, I got news for you, we don't run any plays in Denver. Were you surprised that he was selected Coach of the Year in the NBA last year?
Not really. That doesn't surprise me because I think most times coaches that are named Coach of the Year are going to be from teams that have had a poor season and they move up and have a great season. In very few cases will you have a coach, as in Pat Riley's case, and I thought Pat, the last 2 or 3 years, very easily could have been named Coach of the Year all 3 years. And I think it's an oversight on people's fact that it takes a great coach to coach great players. And Pat's done that as well as anyone in this league, and I think unjustly that he hasn't been named Coach of the Year somewhere.
By the way, have you officially now been named General Manager of the Year, Executive of the Year in the NBA? I don't even know if
No,
that's...
no, I would never expect that. I mean, Roy,
Five
honestly,
championships, at least part of the responsibility, and 2 in a row, has to go with the General Manager, even though you eschew any of those kinds of labels. I mean, it's important, I think, recognition.
Roy, I think every person reacts differently to things like that. I got a tremendous amount of recognition for being a player. And frankly, I really don't worry about things like that. I'm delighted when someone else gets it. It's part of this league, and most of the time it happens to teams that have been down, and people have gone in there and worked as hard or harder than anyone would work in our office, and they've done a great job. So that really does not bother me at all.
If nominated, he will not accept, says Jerry West. We're going to come back, talk about some of the other big stories in the NBA this year. Atlanta Hawks, Detroit Pistons, et al. After this.